such a strong liberal base and still come out as conservative?
Well, I started out with pretty strong views and was just not the sort of person who's going to be intimidated out of them. And to be honest, although most people were liberal, there wasn't a whole lot of intimidation or attempted intimidation that went on.
Okay. And how do you define conservatism?
Well, that's a tricky question. Of course, different people mean different things by it. I think practically speaking, in the U.S., conservatism is an attempt to conserve what is best in the political inheritance that we received from the founding fathers.
What do you think is the greatest challenge facing conservatism today?
I would have to say the decline of marriage in our society. A society in which fewer people get married, in particular, in which fewer people get married before having kids, and then raise those children while staying married, is going to be a less conservative society, as well as a less successful and prosperous one.
What do you think are some of the direct effects of the decline of marriage?
Well, I think that we now have quite a bit of evidence that children raised outside of the marriage of their parents tend to do worse in a host of ways, academically, economically, behaviorally, medically even. And in addition to that, I just think that marriage tends to correlate with conservatism, that a society in which fewer people enjoy the familial stability that comes with lasting marriage is going to be a society where neither economic nor social conservatism has the same appeal that it otherwise would.
Do you think that the conservative movement in America is addressing this issue well? Are they helping to benefit the tradition of marriage, or sort of burying their heads in the sand regarding it?
Well, the change in our mores and the change in the structure of our society away from marriage is such a vast one that it's not easy to see what one would do to reverse it. And so I can't fault conservatives too much for their stance on it. I do think that we could stand to give a little bit more attention to ways in which forming and sustaining a family could be made easier. If there are things that we can do consistent with our limited government principles on taxes or health care or transportation that would make that task of raising a family a little bit easier, we should look into doing that.
You mentioned the limited government principles. Why is that important to conservatism?
Well, I think that conservatism is about self-government. We govern ourselves to the extent possible. We take care of ourselves, and we retain the capacity to help take care of others when needed. So we may be dependent on one another, but we're not dependent on the government. In order to be that kind of society, we need to have a government that stays within its bounds, that does a good job of the things that are within its competence to do, but that does not distract itself in trying to do a lot of things that are beyond its competence.
What would you say is the difference between modern conservatism and conservatism as sort of at the founding of America? How has it evolved?
Well, modern conservatism operates in a different society, a very different society than the one we had at the time of the founders. And the American creed has always contained a kind of universalist aspiration that I think has been more and more lived out in the life of the nation. and is reflected in modern conservatism and in a different way in modern liberalism.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about you came into Princeton as a conservative, how has your sort of upbringing affected your political philosophy?
Well, I was raised in a fairly apolitical household, but I certainly was raised with the kinds of values that conservatives tend to stress more than liberals do, whether it's work or patriotism or family orientation. None of those things are, of course, the exclusive property of conservatives, but they are things that conservatives tend to emphasize more, particularly in public.